Welcome to the Learn It section for Module 1. In this lesson, we're going to talk about knife skills. And knife skills might not be something that you think about as being necessary or important for a registered dietitian to have, but anyone who finds themselves in the kitchen, and most of us will at some point in our life, could benefit from a healthy dose of knife skills. Not only will this make your cooking safer, it will also make it faster, and it will make your food products turn out better. When you're able to cut things in an even way, they're able to cook more thoroughly, cook at the same time, and it results in a better finished product. So the first thing we're going to start with is just kind of going over a few different types of knives, and also talk about how to tell if your knife is sharp enough. And then we're going to go over how we do some routine cuts in the kitchen. And yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. So let's get started. So, we've probably all seen those really expensive knife blocks or knife sets that they have in places like Williams-Sonoma. And while those may be fantastic and it would be really nice to have that sort of thing, the reality is not all of us can, want, or could afford to have those types of tools in our kitchen arsenal. And the other side of things is that it's probably not the reality for many of our patients either. And so if we are well versed in how to use tools that our patients have, it can help us be more useful to them as we're trying to teach them how to best use what they have on hand. So really, I'm just going to go over a couple of different styles of knives, but for the most part, you can get done with just a couple of knives pretty much all of the jobs in the kitchen. So the first knife that I'm going to talk about, which is really our workhorse knife, is going to be the chef's knife. This is going to be the knife you use for most of your chopping and your slicing. It's really going to be one that you use every day, probably, in food preparation. Now, you can get one. This is a solid piece of metal here. They have the kind with a separate handle. If you have that kind, you would want to have the rivets going all the way through the handle. It just makes it a more sturdy tool. I also have this one. I believe I got this from a set at Costco or TJ Maxx. You can find some really great deals there. I love the size of this one. It's really lightweight and is easy to use, and it was not very expensive either. The key to having really functional tools and really functional knives in your kitchen is to keep them sharp. And that's something that took me a long time to learn that lesson, but really when you have well-sharpened knives, it makes your job in the kitchen so much easier. Oftentimes, people think the most dangerous piece of equipment in a kitchen is a sharp knife, but the reality is the most dangerous piece of equipment in a kitchen is a dull knife. And the reason for this is a dull knife requires a lot more pressure applied to make a cut. It can slip off of food more easily, and if you slip off, it's more likely that you could cut yourself. So a sharp knife really is much safer than a dull knife, and keeping your tools well honed, I guess, will make your job as a home chef better. And this is a great lesson to teach our patients. So, talked about the chef knife, a couple of different size options. You really want to size that based on your size as well. Paring knife is going to be a small blade. This is really good for coring vegetables, peeling things. This is going to be your other workhorse of the kitchen. Also a serrated blade. This is great for slicing bread or very delicate vegetables like tomatoes. And I was going to show you a special knife that I have. I don't know if you can see it very well. I'll hold it up so you can see a little bit better. This is a small serrated blade. This is actually called a tomato knife. I do a lot of cutting tomatoes, and so I actually love having a small tomato knife that can be used for cutting cherry tomatoes in half, coring tomatoes, slicing tomatoes. I use it pretty much every day. And then the final knife I want to show you is a slicing knife. This can be used for cutting meat, a number of uses in the kitchen, but really your two workhorses are going to be your chef's knife, your paring knife, and then if you're like me and you do a lot of tomato preparation, a small serrated knife could be great for cutting tomatoes as well. Okay, so how do you know if your knives are sharp or not? Well, a great trick for knowing if your knives are sharp is just to take a regular sheet of paper. And what you're going to want to do is hold the paper on the long end. You're going to take your knife, you're going to slice down and away. And if your knife can cut through the paper with no resistance, then it's probably in good shape. If you have a knife though that requires a little bit of sawing, or it starts to tear the paper, that knife could use to be sharpened. So I'm going to set this knife aside. I need to do a little bit of work on that. To sharpen your knives, you can get an electric knife sharpener, or just a manual knife sharpener. You can use a sharpening stone. There's a number of resources that you can use for sharpening your knives, and there's some great videos on YouTube that will walk you through that process as well. So before you start chopping or cutting, I want you to take inventory of the knives you have, make sure they're nice and sharp, and then we'll get started cutting. So let me set this aside here. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is ready our cutting surface. And in order to safely cut, here's a little trick for you. This is just simply a paper towel. I've dampened it, and what I'm going to do is set it down on my countertop here. And when I set that paper towel down, and then I set my cutting board on top of it, it makes a nice firm foundation here. This cutting board isn't going to slip, and that is also going to improve safety in the kitchen. So that's really important. Okay, so today what we're going to do is cut a number of different vegetables. I'd love for you to practice this at home. We're going to be practicing this in lab as well. And then the vegetables that we chop up when we're in lab, we're going to save those things and use them in a recipe. We're going to freeze them and use them in a recipe a couple modules away. So today what we're going to be working with is carrots, celery, onion, some garlic, and a red pepper. So we're just going to practice a few different knife cuts and chop these vegetables up as you are preparing your own food at home. Practice the skills that you learn in lab today, and maybe you're someone who already has knife skills down, and that's awesome. But if not, maybe these will be some new skills for you that can help your own food preparation at home. So I'm going to start with a chef's knife. I'm going to go to my favorite one here. And when you are preparing yourself to cut, sometimes the tendency is to maybe want to put your finger on top of the blade, or to hold it maybe pretty far back. But what I want you to do is to really choke up on the knife. I don't know if you can see here how I'm gripping it. Kind of grip it like you're gripping a bicycle handle, and then move your knuckle up just a little bit. When you are cutting, you're going to want to keep the tip of your knife down and do this sort of motion. And when you keep the tip of your knife down, you can do this repetitive rocking motion. It takes stress off of your arm and your joint, so you won't fatigue as much if you're doing tons of chopping. It makes it more efficient, and it also makes it safer. So when we are looking to chop vegetables, we want to remember this grip of our knife, and then we also want to remember what our other hand is doing. And when we teach kids knife skills, one thing we like to teach them is to put the bear in the cave. And so in this example, my thumb is the bear and my hands are the cave. I've also heard it referred to as the bear claw. And so basically you're going to pull your thumb away, and you're going to use the tips of your fingers to hold the vegetable. I'll go ahead and get an onion out and show you what I'm talking about. To hold the vegetable in place so that your fingers aren't in the way and in danger of getting cut. So why don't we go ahead and start with an onion. It's probably not a great idea. I cry every time I chop an onion, so this might be pretty ugly, but we'll go ahead and get started. I did pop this onion into the freezer for a few minutes in hopes that that would reduce the juiciness of it, so we'll see if I can keep it together while chopping this onion. So the first thing we're going to do is cut it from pole to pole, and by that I mean we're going to cut lengthwise from the stem end to the root end. Well, I'm going to show you here my bear claw. Got a nice sharp knife here, and one motion, cut it down. Okay. So the next thing I'm doing, if I have a loose paper skin, I'm going to move that off. And the next little trick here is that I'm going to peel back the first layer of this onion. Actually, I'm going to chop off, this is the green end, the stem end, and chop that off and set it aside. Then I'm going to peel back this layer of this onion. Oh no, I can tell. The waterworks are going to start here any second. sometimes you may actually have to pull back the first layer of the onion to get the peel off. But do you see what I'm doing here? I'm actually leaving it intact, and I'm kind of leaving this little tail, and that's going to be helpful to me as I'm chopping it here in just a minute. The next step, I'm going to leave this just like this, is to put my left hand, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to put my left hand on top, and we're going to go for just a not really a small, just a regular chop size on this onion, so about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. And what I'm going to do is put my hand here and really bend my fingers back. I want to get them out of the way. So I'm putting my hand on top, bending my fingers back, and I'm going to make some slices, some horizontal slices, and I don't want to go all the way through the root end. I'm just going maybe a little more than 3/4 of the way back. So I'm cutting here with my knife, keeping my fingers out of the way, making those slices. Got to be super careful as we get towards the top. So I've made about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 slices in this onion. The next thing I'm going to do is use my bear claw, and I'm going to make some vertical cuts here. And I'm really just using the tip end. Again, I'm not going all the way through, trying to keep the vertical cuts the same size. So I'm going for about 1/4 of an inch here. I'm not going through to the root end, and I'm just chopping down here. Take it nice and slow all the way through so that all of my slices, both horizontally and vertically, are about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Now that I have that done, I'm going to grip my little tail here. My fingers are out of the way, and I'm kind of using my thumb and my ring and pinky finger to sort of cradle the onion and keep the slices from fraying out, if that makes sense. So now what I'm going to do is put the tip end of my knife on the board, and I'm just going to start rocking, making this rocking motion. And as I rock down my onion, I'm pushing it ever so slightly towards my knife. And as you can see, I've got perfectly shaped chopped onion here. Looks great. Should have gotten a bowl out. Let me do that really quick. And put my chopped onion here in this bowl. A lot of things you can do for this. A lot of people have the tendency to want to use their knife to scrape the vegetables that they've chopped onto the board. You can do that, just know it's going to dull your knife. This is called a bench scraper. You can use it. There's some pastry applications to it, but it's a great tool to use to scoop up anything that's on your board and put aside. So now you can see I just have a tiny bit here, and if I had more, I could use it just really if I don't want to waste any of this onion, which I don't, of course. Get some of this over here too. I'll go ahead and pick that up. Again, perfectly chopped onion, super easy, very safe, very efficient, a lot easier than perhaps you've done in the past. So we're going to do the same thing with this side. I'm chopping off the stem end here, pulling back my first couple of layers, really till I get to that good onion layer underneath. This one's being a little persnickety on me. That's all right. Ooh, I hate to lose that much, but that's all right. So, get my board clean here. Another great skill to develop, and I'm still developing this one myself, is to keep your workspace clean and tidy as you're going through the cooking process. This really does help make things more efficient, helps you know where things are, find things more easily, put the right ingredients in at the right time. So again, we're going to do that same process, hand out of the way. I'm making my horizontal slices maybe about 7/8 of the way through the onion. Keep it going here. All right. Vertical slices, again, I'm really just using the tip end of my knife. My bear claw's working, keep my fingers out of the way. And I'm going to start rocking again. Chopping that onion. my root end over here. I'll show you how nicely that bench scraper works. Move all of that chopped onion into my bowl. As you can see, perfectly chopped onion, just a few simple steps. Pretty simple, straightforward, and with a little bit of practice, very quick way to chop an onion, especially, again, getting it into those evenly sized pieces. And once more, that's really important because when things are chopped to even sizes, they cook at the same speed. And that's important for having a good finished product. Onion's a great source of vitamin C. It's also a good source of calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, good source of dietary fiber and inulin as well. So it is fantastic for adding flavor to dishes. You use it a lot in the preparation of dishes. You'll saute some onion in oil or butter, something like that. Really starts to develop flavor in the dish. So chopping onion, not something to be scared of doing, very simple and straightforward. Okay, next thing we're going to do is move to a carrot. I'm sure all of you have chopped carrots in your life. When you cut a carrot, get my onion off the board here. When you cut a carrot into these penny-sized slices, this is just called slicing. When you get these rounds, this is just slicing a carrot. If you were to ever get instructions to cut something on the bias, what you would do is turn your knife at a 45-degree angle, or I guess what you would do is turn your food kind of at a 45-degree angle. And essentially you're going to cut it here. It's the same repetitive rocking motion. You're just kind of pushing the food in at that angle, and that results in these oval-shaped slices you can see here. So this would be cut on the diagonal or a horizontal slice here. Sorry, not a horizontal slice, a diagonal slice here. You may have a recipe that requires a dice. So how do you take a round vegetable like this and get it into even square shapes? Well, that can be a little bit dangerous because, as you can see, carrots are round, they roll around, and it's not always the safest thing to try and chop a carrot when it's rolling around. So the first thing we want to do is shave off just a tiny bit here along the side, and we're doing that to make it flat. And that flat surface will make it much safer for us to chop. So now that we've done that, what I want to do is cut this into about half-inch slices. And I'm going to go ahead and do that here. My fingers are out of the way. There's one. Ooh, this one's a little narrow. There we go. And here is two. Now that I have that done, I'm going to stack using my flat ends, and I'm going to make matchsticks out of this. Now, a fatter carrot is easier to work with. This one's not huge, so I'm kind of having to move my knife back a little bit. And you can see that I get some pretty even sticks here. And with this one, I'm not going to try and stack. If you are trying to dice a wet vegetable like a tomato, I would never stack more than 2 slices. If you've got a potato that you're trying to dice, or a really big carrot, parsnip, rutabaga, another root vegetable like that, you can put a few slices together to make a dice. But for something that's wet, I would never stack more than a couple together. So now we just gather up our matchstick pieces like this. I'm going to line them all up and do the same thing. I'm just going to do my chops here. Can move it through using my bear claw. And as you see, I've got some perfect little carrot cubes here. They're all the same size essentially, and that's going to result in cooking at the same speed. And that's really important for quality of recipe. All right, so celery, couple different preparations here. First thing I'm going to do is chop off the root end. You may have instructions to slice celery on the bias, similar to the carrots, you're going to do the same thing. Turn your knife, chop, chop, chop. You get some nice angled celery slices there. You might get instructions to dice celery, and if that's the case, one little trick that I love, and this one's super curvy, but one trick is to put the tip of your knife down, kind of drag it through. I've done this evenly, so as you can see, what I've essentially done is split this celery into 3 pieces. I'm going to turn it over and get a little bit more control and move it through just like I did with the carrot. And that's going to result in some beautiful little cubes of celery. This is great when you're maybe starting a soup and you need celery, onion, and carrot. That moi pois makes such great flavor, depth of flavor. You need those pieces all to be about the same size. So what I'd love for you to practice at home, get you some celery, some carrots, some onion, and practice doing these cuts, especially chopping and dicing, just because that is something that you will use so much as you're preparing food. And for those of you who have been cooking for a really long time, you may have developed your own method for how you cut, but maybe there's a few things, a few new techniques that you could learn to speed up your production or to make things just a little bit easier on you. So at this point, we've chopped some onion beautifully. We have some great celery and carrot here going on, and then the next thing that I want to show you is minced garlic. So as you know, you can buy a jar of minced garlic at the grocery store. That's great in a pinch. I always keep some in my refrigerator in case I don't have fresh garlic, but if you can use fresh garlic, it's always going to have more depth of flavor. It's going to taste better. So I love to use fresh garlic whenever I can. Now, if you have a garlic press, that's great. I have one that I really love. I can put my bulbs or my cloves of garlic directly into the garlic press with the skin on. Use it that way and just press it right out. It makes things nice and fast. But you don't have to have a garlic press in order to mince garlic really well. What you need is a chef's knife, and so that's what we're going to use here. So all I have is I have a clove of garlic. It still has most of the skin on. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the flat of my knife here on top of the clove of garlic, and I'm going to use the flat of my hand, the heel of my hand, to give it a whack right there. And as you can see, what's happened is it's kind of popped open that garlic, and it just releases the skin. It's so easy the way that that works. And so now what I'm going to do is take my garlic clove. Using that same grip on my knife, I'm making little slices. And then I want you to start very slowly with this, but this is where you get to kind of practice that chopping back and forth that you see on the Food Network or any kind of cooking show that you may watch. Remember, if you are using this kind of mincing technique, if you're right-handed, then your left hand's going to go on top of your blade, vice versa if you're left-handed, but make sure you keep those fingers out of the way of the blade. And so what we're going to do here, I've got a great grip on the knife. You can see really strong grip on the knife, and what I'm doing here is I'm just going back and forth, chopping over that garlic. I kind of round it up, change the angle of my knife, clean it off here and there. So I'm making sure that I'm actually chopping the garlic each time I pass through until I get what are these teeny, teeny, tiny little pieces of garlic you can see here. So the final veggie we're going to chop in our knife skills session is this red pepper. And I'm going to teach you a trick that I learned and I think makes it easier to deal with a vegetable that can be a little unstable at times. So the first thing we're going to do is take our chef's knife. We're going to get a good grip on it, as always, and we're going to start by cutting off a little bit at the top. I'm just kind of turning it around here to make a nice even cut. And now what I'm going to do is just twist it here and remove the seeds. So that's a really easy way to stem and seed the pepper. The next thing I'm going to do is just push down on, around the base of the stem, and I'm going to pop the stem and the seeds out. We're going to use this. This is still good red pepper, so I'm just going to set that aside. The next thing I'm going to do is cut the bottom of my pepper off. And basically what this is doing is giving me a nice flat top and bottom that I can work with. Move those seeds out of the way. The next step is to cut down the top. So I'm just making a cut here. I'm going to cut it maybe right here, and then I'm going to cut it right here as well. So what this is doing is giving me pieces that are just much easier to work with. I'm going to hold them flat, and I'm just going to cut the ribs out just like this. So I'm just using the tip of my knife essentially just to cut the ribs out of the red pepper. And again, all this is doing is making it easier for me to work with. And then, now that I have my 3 pieces, the next thing I'm going to do is cut my pepper into matchsticks. So I'm going to start right here. Tip of my knife goes down, keeping my fingers away from the blade, rocking my knife up and down. Do the same thing here, using my bear claw, my thumbs tucked away. Up and down rocking motion gives us these nice matchsticks. So if you were just chopping up a bell pepper to serve, this would be a great way just to serve it. You can make your matchsticks a little bit thicker if you were going to dip it in some kind of veggie dip or something. So I'm doing the same thing here. And then, once I have my whole pepper cut into matchsticks, I'm just going to start to gather those pieces together. I'm not going to do it all at one time, that would be a little bit too much, but I'll gather it maybe in 3 different little bunches, and I'm just going to sort of even up the ends. And I do the same thing here. I'm sort of using my ring finger, my pinky finger, and my thumb to hold this bunch together. And then I'm just going to do the same thing here. And I'll just repeat this until my pepper is completely chopped. But as you can see, I've got these nice uniform cubes of red pepper that we're going to use in a recipe a little bit later on. So this is a great, easy way to chop a pepper. I did mention that we would use these pieces, and what we're going to do essentially with them, we're going to cut them into matchstick-like pieces. You can see they're not exactly flat as well. And then we'll just turn them to the side, come back through, and cut them into, these are about quarter-inch size pieces. They're not quite as uniform as the matchsticks, but absolutely usable, perfect for this application, in an easy way that no part of the pepper goes to waste. We would do the same thing with this end of the pepper. So quick and easy way to chop a bell pepper.